Gentlemen, good morning. It's Bob back for another BTC Breakdown. I'm gonna jump right in here this morning. No time to waste. As you can probably see, there's already some. I won't call them fireworks necessarily, but some things going on already this morning. So we'll get right down to it. Uh, Having some computer trouble this morning, so hopefully audio and video are fine. But nonetheless, let's take a look at Bitcoin. So, it's interesting. I can't remember if in the video yesterday I'd had this falling channel in here yet or not, but I was kind of looking at it yesterday, and I was thinking, all right, well, let's maybe at least consider putting a trend line along the bottom here. And I like to use these parallel channels because they make it easy to establish a good top range as well. Where you can get a nice, again, it's parallel channel, right? So I went ahead and I matched up the bottom here as well as possible, and then kind of went ahead and made that across the top. And here you go. You can see that in fact it is holding up. Um, Essentially that means that Bitcoin is in a small downtrend right now within this overarching uptrend that we've been dealing with since back here, basically the past 3 weeks at this point. More or less an uptrend. Um, I think in terms of me looking at this myself, I've kind of looked at this particular yellow, thicker trend line as the most primary trend line that we've been riding. Essentially, bearish fake out here, bearish fake out here, and then otherwise we've maintained that thicker yellow line. I think this could be that time where we maybe end up losing it. Now, in terms of what we're looking at right at the moment, we had this pop yesterday, or going back, I guess a day and a half maybe. We had this nice pop here, came up, retraced. We had this. I was actually talking to Matt about this yesterday. I was saying, hey, look out for a bearish or a bullish fake out here, and we got it. And I told him I drew this line yesterday, and I put it in a chart to him, and I said, hey, look, if Bitcoin doesn't break out of this green line between here and here, let's go ahead and assume that we need to be short, and there you have it. You can see that in fact it lined up directly with it. Again, the beauty of TA, honestly, I mean, you can, you draw your trend lines, and you can sometimes you can identify a time frame with which you can expect things to happen in. But essentially, what we've got here, we got a small head and shoulder pattern, shoulder, head, shoulder. Basically, we're taking this from here to here, take that same distance from here to here, and apply it to this downside. Chances are pretty good that means we're basically putting in a retest down here at about 42.7. Now, I believe I've mentioned this before. Stop me if you heard this. I did see that the 8-wave bearish cycle pattern, the Elliott wave. And as far as how that applies here, I think at the end of the day, we might actually see something come down lower. Now, this is the measured move from this part here, but now let's assume that we operate within this green downward channel until we no longer do. So I think it's feasible, that essentially we're going to spend the next, say, maybe 24 to 48 hours making our way actually down through this line. What you'll probably end up seeing happen is we're going to come down, test here, get a nice little bounce, come up, retest here, get rejected, and then move down here or here. Then, hopefully that all takes place within the next, 2 days. Then all of a sudden we've got a nice weekend action again, maybe putting a bearish retest here. And then we're going to come down here one more time maybe and test out these numbers. And again, I'm not necessarily trying to predict that that is absolutely what's going to happen. I'm just telling you that that would be a reasonable thing to expect at this point. And especially given the overall pattern. And I see Bitcoin is falling some more right now. But give me 1 second and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about with the overall pattern and how this kind of applies here. All right, so, again, talking about the larger overall pattern, we were looking at an hourly chart just a second ago. You can see there's a ton of action that takes place Going back to the daily chart, though, um, this makes it look very different, right? You can see here now what I want to bring into the picture again here, and so you can understand why I have this rounded pattern going here, is because of this guy. And let's kind of draw. I don't know. I'm not technologically up on this chart here, but you can basically see, though, if we compare kind of this section to this section. Um, we've got a slightly higher high that was put in here, and then we come on down. We've got some additional downside. Then we get another slight push to the upside. There we go. We're getting some more notifications, but we get another slight push to the upside, and then all of a sudden we're back down again. So essentially consider this right here to be this area of the graph, right? It was essentially a bearish fake out. If you would put in a rounded pattern here, it holds up very well. So that's why I negated this part from the actual pricing information that this has given us. Now, obviously, this chart's a little bit different than my other one, but essentially, just continue to keep in mind we've got this rising channel, but also if we take this line right here and then we take this green line from the rising channel, we've essentially got a rising wedge. So it would actually be a perfectly normal scenario to a rising wedge falls down to the downside more often than not, as does this pattern too. But the rising wedge, let's assume that it kind of looks like an arrow point here, right? So you've got this as your bottom boundary. You got this as the top boundary. This pattern exits to the downside fairly routinely. And depending on what Bitcoin does with the bottom trend line here, maybe we actually do come back up here later on. You can see that might put us into the first few days of March before we get knocked back here. I just don't know, right? I can't tell you for sure what will happen. We could very well come back down here today, right? We could very well put in a huge bearish engulfing candle, something similar like this nasty guy here, or this nasty guy, put that in today and just get, completely down. Now, again, when comparing this chart to my other chart on the smaller time frames, we've got a channel that essentially goes here and here. So it wouldn't be entirely uncommon to see the pricing action come back down and at least retest the bottom edge of this, this channel that you don't really see right now. Let's move, let's call this the bottom of this channel. It wouldn't be surprising to see it come back down and retest somewhere down in here. Now, as part of that 8-wave bearish cycle, though, it actually does get back outside of this rounded bottom at some point. So I don't know if that takes place after we get here. And then, we assume that the fall takes place from here. This is the measured move approximately, pulls us back to about 38, which gives us a beautiful inverse head and shoulder pattern. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but again, everything's still tracking along. It's just a matter of how we actually get there, whether we're going to get knocked back here and then burst up here over the next week. But I think I mentioned it in my video yesterday, and I think it's important because there are very few people that I listen to on YouTube, but there is one guy, and it just so happened that he mentioned a very similar concept as I did yesterday, that everything I saw on my chart suggested that sometime, within the months of March and April, assuming this pattern plays out, it ends by like right here, right? So it is interesting that he happened to mention it at the same time I did, because I'm sitting here looking at the screen too, thinking, all right, well, if we're here and this pattern plays out by here, and my expectation is at least potentially that this market is done by, especially the altcoin market is wrapping up its move here, then that basically gives us, for all intents and purposes, about 2 months for some extreme action to take place. So I do think that probably within the next few weeks here, we start to see some serious fire going on. If the only way I don't see that happening is in the event that obviously this pattern is fool's gold, and maybe we got a fake out to the bottom side, but then this also maybe ends up being a fake out to the upside, and then we retrace back into here. That's the only way this scenario doesn't play out, where this market is basically wrapping up in the next 2 months. Is in the event that we that I identified a pattern that isn't what the market is doing right now. Otherwise, I would fully expect that we're essentially wrapping up alt season somewhere in here. So should be very interesting, if nothing else. Again, not much to say today besides the fact that obviously we're going to see some small pullback, which has already started. And again, it's just a matter of us kind of identifying the good opportunities to go ahead and jump in and buy. We took some profits and cleared out long positions, understanding that we had this upper boundary ahead of us. So yeah, everything's looking good. Still tracking along, and as long as things don't completely come off the rail here, man, we're going to keep making some great money and expect some serious excitement here over the next few months. If in fact this is the pattern and it plays out, and we're going to be ahead of the game, because a lot of people maybe are going to look at this and be like, oh, it's around the bottom. I'm going to buy it right here, and then they're going to get hit when it comes back down to here. But we're going to be prepared for that in the event that it happens. Man, I look forward to keeping this thing going.